Hey everyone, welcome back to another installment of the video series called Stuff That Chris Thinks. In this episode of Stuff That Chris Thinks, we're going to be looking not at how words work within describing things that happen at youth group, but how words work in the Christian life together. Everybody, the words that we use shape our understanding of our experience, meaning that words make meaning for us. They interpret our experience, and the way we use words shapes how we exist in the world. And those are, big concepts. I appreciate it. But I want to give you an example of how words have shaped my own understanding, my own way of existing in this place that God has put me recently. I was reading a novel recently, and I don't need to tell you the title. It was all right, but one of the characters in this novel was describing what love was like for them. And they said, and this is a paraphrase, they said, love is a feeling that makes me happy. And I thought to myself, yes and no, like maybe they want to think a little bit more about this. Maybe they want to put more adequate words to describe what love is. But this character in this book, they said that love is a feeling that makes them happy, and so they treated the other characters in this book, the people that they love, their role was kind of in a supporting role. They were there to make this one individual feel happy, and if this person felt love, then they would feel happy. I got a bit of time on my hands these days, apparently, in the global pandemic, so I was reading another book recently. And it struck me simply that the character in this other book was also describing what love meant to her. And she had a more, I would say, adequate way of describing the significance of love. And in fact, I wrote it down so I wouldn't quote it wrong. This is what the other character says in this alternate book. She says, "Love is the difficult realization that someone other than oneself is real." Love is the difficult realization that someone other than oneself is real. And I want to suggest to you that, as I was reading this, and maybe as you hear these words as well, there's a different way of being in the world if love is like the second set of words than if love is like the first set of words. If love is the difficult realization that other people are real, that means that love isn't about making me happy. People I love don't serve me and make me happy, but love means that I put myself in other people's shoes. Love means that I see through their eyes and I serve them. Love means that the actions of love have cost me something. And the reason we're talking about this is that you will see in this little example is that the words that each character uses to describe love profoundly changes their experience and their understanding of what is going on when they experience love. Like I alluded to in the loft there, Christians also use a lot of words. And the point of this little video is I would like us to take a minute and examine and think about what words do we use, and do we use them flippantly, or are there very profound and deep things occurring as we put words to our experience of Christ's love, our experience of the fellowship of the Spirit, our experience of Christian community together, our experience of witness and mission in this world. We're standing here in the office wing of the church, everyone, and I'd like to point out to us that there are a lot of words that are written here when there is not a global pandemic. On an average week, this is where things like Bible studies and worship services and sermons and youth messages and bulletin announcements and all those types of things. There are a lot of words that come out of this wing of the church. And I should also say to us that it's not just the people who work in this area of the church. It's all of us together are putting words together to describe our experience of who God is. We're putting words together that draw our hearts into the wonder and mystery of a God who loves us very much. The point of our talk together today, and maybe I should have put this up front, but I've been a little bit coy, is that I want us to think about a little bit about what happens in worship. There are many words that come together. There are people who pray, and there are people who sing, and there are people who speak, and there are people that orate the calls to worship and all that stuff. And I want to suggest that those are more than words that just fill up space, but these words are serving a purpose. These words are drawing our hearts into relation with who God is. These words are directing our worship to the living God. And I have a little, I want to give you an account of I'll call it an experience I had recently. It is today Easter Monday in the Christian calendar. And last week, obviously, we were preparing for Easter, and I was listening to some songs and to some hymns on YouTube back at home, where I do actually the bulk of the work at the church these days. And there was one song in particular that just struck me. I don't know who wrote it. I tried to find out. It's by someone called Elevation Worship, so I apologize for my ignorance, but it's called Resurrection. And these are the lyrics, everyone. Again, I've written them down to make sure I get them right. The singer sings, "In your name I come alive to speak of your victory, for the resurrected King is resurrecting me." And in my own experience of these words, the resurrected King is resurrecting me, drew my heart into like this pure and honest worship before the Lord. It turned my being towards my Maker, towards my God, the person or the God who created me, and solicited an act of worship that maybe I could not have given if I did not have these words at that moment. I want to turn now, and we're going to interview someone who thinks very carefully about words and how words work for worship and how words draw us into worship. So in a second, we're going to have Peter on camera, and we're going to grill him about how words tune us to worship, how words draw us into the wonder and the mystery of a God who created us and loves us very much. Everybody, in a wholly non-scripted way, let's ask Peter some questions about the types of words that draw us into worship. And the first thing, Peter, I hope you won't judge me because of this, but I confess, and not often, okay? Not often, everybody, but sometimes I know people sit in church and their minds wander. The words that are being sung in the hymns or the sermon or whatever just seem not to connect. And we've been talking about why words are important. What happens when words don't connect with us?
I think a metaphor is to talk about words, isn't it?
Yeah.
So a metaphor that I like is to think about the fact that we all eat 3 meals a day, most of us eat 3 meals a day, but most of us probably can't describe what we had for breakfast 2 days ago.
I can't. No.
Now, unless you eat the same thing every day, you probably can't. But does that mean that that meal wasn't important? Does that mean that meal wasn't relevant? Well, it was relevant. It spoke to you. You ate it. You had it. It nurtured you. There are meals we do remember. Yes. Like a big banquet or a special dinner that we had with someone. We remember those meals as particularly important and powerful. And so what I'm trying to say is that coming to worship is partly about the habit of being in worship with other people. Maybe not every time is it the best meal we've ever had. Maybe not every time does it speak to us profoundly. But it's part of that habit. Now, playing with the image of food again, there's sometimes, when we might have been younger that we've been introduced to food, we say, you don't like this very much. But over time, we decide that, no, we in fact like this. So maybe sometimes in worship we need to get pushed, prodded, pulled out of our comfort zone. Maybe a bit uncomfortable, or it feels a bit boring. But those times can be stretching us, growing us, taking us into new places.
Yeah, I like that. I'm also wondering, maybe not all the words are meant for me every Sunday. Maybe there is a song that the words speak to you, and then there's a song that the words speak to me more particularly. What do you think of that?
Right, and we talked about that a bit at the retreat, congregational retreat, that we come with different kinds of approaches and styles to worship. And we all don't have the same one. And so this particular song, maybe I need to sing with gusto because my neighbor or someone back in the balcony, that this is their style, this fits their personality, this fits about who they are. So for myself, I'm someone who lives in my head a lot.
I wasn't going to say anything.
But that means that I resonate with hymns that speak to my head. I'm not so much someone who's warmly hearted at times. And so that means that I need to choose hymns, we need to sing hymns that may not be my comfort zone all the time. I mean, I mentioned at the retreat that I particularly don't really get turned on by I come to the garden alone.
Yeah.
But I know for people, there are people for whom that is profoundly, deeply meaningful. So we need together as a community be a place where we have that opportunity to share different ways and different approaches and to sing hymns that are for someone else this time.
Yeah. Continuing with our non-scripted conversation here. You often write prayers and obviously sermons, and you say other things. How do you choose words for worship?
I think the words that matter, the words that work, are simple. Words, so I think the communication, and I also want to make a difference between communication that's for speech and communication that's written, read. Those are two very different things. So think about communication that's for speech. I think that simple, clear, I learned a lot from Stuart McLean, who wrote very short sentences. So I think there's a value to writing short sentences. I know I sometimes get very wrong on, as I have just with the sentence I'm giving you right now.
We're not grading this. Don't grade this, everybody. Yeah.
But simplicity of language, and then when there are big words, complex technical words, those are worth introducing and saying these words matter and holding them. I also think it's about patterns of speech. It's not so much just words, but sentences. And are there sentences that can be built that will stick in people's heads? Not every sentence, but are there a few that can stick in people's heads? For example, there are lyrics of hymns that stick in our minds because they are so profound. But sometimes you look at the words, they're very simple words.
Yeah.
But somehow they've been put together in a way that speaks profoundly.
Yeah.
And so simple sentences that get earwormed in our brains are really valuable.
Yeah. I think some words seem to have more weight or more significance, and then some words seem maybe more thin. Do you want to speak to that? Are there words that are thick with meaning and then words that are thin and trivial?
Yes, I think there are. And we can use the same word, which actually could be thick in meaning, but in a very trivial way. I mean, the example you used earlier in this talk about love, if it's just something that makes me feel happy, that's a pretty thin interpretation of love.
Yeah.
Or the one that you gave is much thicker. Words develop also an experience in our lives. So a word I think that develops thickness in our lives is a word like forgiveness. That early on in our childhood, forgiveness seems relatively easy. That's great, nothing against it for kids at that level. But as we grow older and more complex, we realize that forgiveness is a very weighty word with lots of thickness to it. And we recognize when people use it thinly, in a superficial way, and that turns us off.
Yeah.
And so these words, they're words that develop that thickness, that power, that significance by the overlay of experiences in our lives and by the overlay of what we see in the world around us. I was in a conversation today with someone who said, the word kindness in our time right now is probably growing. Now, she didn't use the word thickness, but she meant deeper meaning, and she's probably right.
Yeah.
I also think the word thankfulness, as we have all these people who are being thankful to frontline workers, I think that thankfulness is also growing in thickness in our culture right now because of what's going on. So situations can add thickness to a word as well.
Yeah. I've asked if Peter had a poem that, spoke to him as an example of words that draw us into worship, or maybe words that facilitate.
Well, let's just start with one that I think is fun.
Okay, just, is it a limerick?
That's not a limerick. This is a poem from when I was a child, Robert Louis Stevenson. And since this is the day after, since this is Easter Monday and it's very windy out there, this seems to be a good poem. So it's called Windy Nights by Robert Louis Stevenson. And it has no theological implications, I just like the words. Whenever the moon and stars are set, whenever the wind is high, all night long in the dark and wet, a man goes riding by. Late in the night when the fires are out, why does he gallop and gallop about? Whenever the trees are crying aloud, the ships are tossed at sea, by on the highway, low and loud, by the gallop goes he, by the gallop goes he, and then by he comes back at the gallop again. Simple words, but has a rhythm and a poem and a pattern to them, which I find really cool as a language. It's just fun with words.
It is, but you have a second one here.
I have a second one. This is by G.K. Chesterton.
Oh.
And his famous poem about the donkey at Palm Sunday.
This will be good, everyone.
So the
no pressure. Continue.
Thanks. The Donkey by G.K. Chesterton. When fishes flew and forests walked, and figs grew upon thorn, some moment when the moon was blood, then surely I was born. With monstrous head and sickening cry, and ears like errant wings, the devil's walking parody on all four-footed things. The tattered outlaw of the earth, of ancient crooked will, starved, scourged, deride me, I am dumb, I keep my secret still. Fools, for I also had my hour, one far fierce hour and sweet. There was a shout about my ears, and palms before my feet. I love the twist. This thing that doesn't matter is derided, in fact, is the donkey of Palm Sunday.
That's good. Well, everyone, we thank Peter for letting me, twist his arm into these things. We'll catch you in just a second, everybody. We hope this little video has been helpful to you folks. The words we use draw us into worship, and the right word at the right moment turns our heart to God. If you keep this in mind, I don't know, for the videos that we have here at St. Andrews or when we eventually come back together, we hope that a sense of appreciation of the language that we're using and what it does will enrich your worship of your Maker as well. If you stick around for a moment in this video, I have a few diagrams and boring stuff that's a little nerdy, but for the nerds among you, you may like this. For those who don't, not a problem. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Stuff That Chris Thinks. See you, everyone. Hey everyone, welcome to the bonus content of this video. I was just thinking, if it is helpful, I'll throw a few diagrams on the board for you, and if it's not helpful, feel free to surf and browse YouTube to your heart's content. But if it is helpful, let's look at this. In our video, we talked about words and how words make meaning and how words are important to us. And a little argument might go like this. In our minds, we hold a picture of what reality is like. And that picture of reality is from a certain perspective, and it contains facts about the reality that we find ourselves in. But those facts are held within thoughts, and thoughts themselves are comprised of words and comprised of language. So to have the right words, in order to have the right thoughts, in order to have the right facts, in order to have a good picture that we can operate within, we look for words that clarify our experience and words that help us to make meaning out of our experience. Then switching over to this other diagram, if this is helpful, what I've got here is how meaning is created. And I should say to you, this is essentialized, this is simplistic, but it fits on a whiteboard, so it's good enough for us today. And so here's how this works. If we are going to make meaning in our lives, we have events that happen to us, and then we have kind of a picture or an understanding of those events that happen to us, and we make sense of these things with the language that we use. And all three of these things work together, each informing one another to create meaning. If you are a super nerd, and I include myself in this category for the record, you can look up people like Ludwig Wittgenstein, and this is basically a little bit of a summary of his thought. And if you're not a super nerd, all the power to you, and you just leave it at this and go and worship the Lord, who He's created you to be.